Education. So much promise. Too often not realized. Yet we bank our future heavily on education. What is right? What is wrong? And what is changing in education? Frank Worrell is Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of California, Berkeley, where he serves as Faculty Director of the School Psychology Program, the Academic Talent Development Program, and the California College Preparatory Academy. He was the 2022 President of the American Psychological Association and received the UC Berkeley Chancellor's Award for Advancing Institutional Excellence and Equity, and a Distinguished Scholar Award from the National Association for Gifted Children. His books include Talent Development as a Framework for Gifted Education, which won the National Association for Gifted Children's Scholar Book of the Year Award, and The Psychology of High Performance, which won that organization's Scholar Book of the Year Award as well. To be published this May, he's co-authoring Motivation Mythbusters, Science-Based Strategies to Boost Motivation in Yourself and Others. Frank Worrell, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
We'll find out. Maybe by the end it'll suck.
I guess. We'll find out.
Right. Well, as a human being, Frank, forget about all those titles and all that stuff. How do you feel about education's progress over your lifetime?
You know, I think we have made some strides, but we still have a ways to go. I was lucky enough, I think, I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago to have a very good education. And I think that sometimes some students are not getting as good an education as I got, even though it's several decades later. I think we have not realized the promise of serving kids who are underrepresented, who don't get to higher ed.
And if you were the emperor of education, you had a magic wand, and you could make one change in education in America, do you have any idea what that change might be?
I think I would actually change teacher education.
Say more.
I think that teachers don't necessarily, I think, realize that their job, that an integral part of their job is to, in fact, make their kids feel passionate about learning. It's not just to communicate the subject matter, but to communicate an enthusiasm and a passion for learning, because that's what drives everything.
Seems to me this if you were my boss and you gave me that mandate and I was a teacher, this is what I would do, and I'm curious what you think. It would be far more about doing projects with a big payoff at the end. So, writing a play and performing it, developing a science experiment that gets done for the whole school or made a YouTube video, making a movie. All the learning, the critical thinking, the reading, the math would be embedded, but it would be, I think we're more likely to engender passion if we have a real project, not just some paper that goes into the ether.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think that you are on the right track. I do think that what we want is students to get sort of real-world experiences. The difficulty, of course, it's a more difficult way to teach to start with.
Sure.
The difficulty is, how do you get the basic things, the skills that you want them to learn as part of that? But I think it pays off much more in the long run.
So maybe your point is right, that we need a bifurcation. There needs to be some no-nonsense basic teaching of reading and critical thinking or whatever, but have an application of that to some major project.
That's exactly right. And I think some of the most successful lessons now have involved kids, for instance, studying the water in their neighborhood and stuff, for impurities and stuff, and looking at the traffic patterns, and those kinds of things, because these are real-world things that students can see.
You have been in the School of Education for a long time, heading the School Psychology Program, truly on the inside. Have there been any changes in the School of Education in the way in which they educate school psychologists, teachers, whatever, that would be interesting for us to hear, or me to hear?
Yeah, I'm not sure about how interesting they are, but I do think that I think some of the things that have changed have actually been sort of more structural. So I think we have a more diverse set of scholars. I think there is a recognition of the importance of diverse perspectives, and I think that's an important thing. I think the school actually also has embraced public education in a way that it did not before. In the sense that many times programs like school psychology and teacher ed were seen as in the school but not of the school. You know, we were deeply cerebral thinkers. Right. And I think there's now a recognition that in fact our thinking needs to be about application, about what is going on in the school.
And how is your own behavior as a leader, as a mentor, teacher, graduate student advisor, how have you embodied that, if at all, in your work?
Well, I have tried, I think, to get students to recognize that the fact that they're getting a PhD in school psychology is not the important thing. The important thing are the things that they're learning to do, which they can use in many contexts, perhaps as a school psychologist, but outside of that as well. So it's about the learning of the skills that you're getting, active listening, developmental psychology that you can communicate to teachers and principals and so forth.
My dear friend Alan Gold, who's a graduate of the program, we graduated together same time, whom I respect deeply, and I ask him periodically about the field of social psychology, and what he noted with interest was how much focus there now is on autism and transgender issues, bullying, things like that. You don't have to address all of them, but do you have an interesting thought about any one of those issues?
I think that we really try to focus on the issues that we see as problems, and rather than think more holistically, because ultimately the kid who's transgender, the kid who has autism, all of them have the same needs. They need to belong, they need to communicate, they need to feel respected by their teachers and their peers. And so taking, I think, a more holistic approach, I think would be a useful one. But I think schools like to count beans. and I think that's why, in fact, we tend to do these focus on these various things.
You know, as I'm listening to you and I'm trying to picture myself in the audience, a lot of this stuff is common sense. But one of the things that even really smart people in our audience need to recognize is that common sense doesn't necessarily always get implemented. And there is a Grand Canyon of difference between what we say we should do and what we do. Do you find that at all?
Yes, I think so. So take the name of our school psychology. You're trained in school psychology, I'm trained in school psychology. It's school psychology, but oftentimes students who are working as school psychologists are only working with special ed. They're not working with kids in the normal, in regular education. They're not working with gifted and talented. They're not working with teachers and principals. Right. So they become special education psychologists rather than school psychologists.
Good point.
They have much more to give, and I think that's
wow, that's huge. And now I want to make a personal story. I was born, I'm a child of Holocaust survivor. I grew up in the Bronx, terrible neighborhood. My parents spoke no English. But I did inherit my father's intelligence. He learned 6 languages in the concentration camps. He was just a smart guy.
Right.
And he conveyed that to me. But when I was in school, I'm hyperactive. You see, I'm hyperactive now. I certainly was as a child. If they had Ritalin back then, they would have put it into me intravenously. Right. I was bored shitless. I was reading on at least the 6th grade level in the 1st grade. And I was sitting there still, and we had ability group classes back then, and I was still bored shitless. What advice do you have to the parents or grandparents or teachers, educators? Right. You talked about the gifted. Gifted programs have been eviscerated. Funding has been largely eliminated. What advice do you have as a guy? You've spent more time dealing with the gifted than almost anybody. You run the summer program for gifted at Berkeley. What advice do you have to parents, teachers, educators, kids who are like that in a world in which we live in, where the focus is on the lowest achievers?
Yeah. I think that what everybody needs to do is actually to take the special ed mantra actually more to heart. A free, appropriate public education. We typically use that for kids who have learning challenges. We don't use that same mantra for kids who have tremendous learning potential, right? One of my colleagues did a study in which he found that sometimes as many as 2/3 of the kids in a classroom have learned most of the material for that year already.
Wow.
At the beginning of the year, they already know it.
Right.
But they have to sit through the year.
Right.
And so basically what we need as one of my colleagues said, James Borland, is gifted education without gifted children. What does this kid know, and where do they then need to move?
I love it.
And what that requires then is teachers, educators, and parents assessing kids at the beginning of the year and saying that, oh, you've already gone through half this book. We can start you in chapter 7.
Does that create a big challenge, though, for teachers? We are in our heterogeneously grouped classes. So you've got everybody from special needs to gifted, native speakers of English to newcomers of English, and we're asking these teachers now to not only assess at the beginning of the year, but individualize. Is that a big ask?
It is a big ask, and I do recognize it, but many of the students who in fact are advanced, if you set them on the path, then you don't need to check in as much, and you can actually give more time to kids who have more challenges learning on. The other thing, I mean, one of my colleagues, Rona Weinstein, you may remember her, she retired in 2007. Rona talks about adult-rich environments. And schools, we have this model of, the single teacher in the classroom. But schools benefit when they are adult-rich environments. That's one of the reasons why sometimes smaller class sizes help, for example.
Right. If I remember, you co-edited a book. You brought one book, and coincidentally, here we have a book edited by Rona Weinstein and Frank Worrell. Tell me something about this book that might surprise me.
Right. I think what is surprising about the book, I guess I don't know if it's surprising, but it was the passion that the students had, that the teachers had, that everybody had for education in a context where that was low income. So the student on the cover, this student who's on the cover, actually made this statement. So I'll read this. It's very short.
Good.
I grew up in Richmond, and a lot of people there...
Richmond, California, by the way, is a very low-income area.
Yeah. A lot of people there don't know about college, or they just don't care about it. So there's always that distraction of the two different paths that I could have chosen. And sometimes it was hard to stay away from those bad paths, but I overcame it. And it just made me want to be even better, to do something better with my life. Education, to me, the core of education, and that's what parents need to communicate, teachers need to communicate, is opening up worlds of possibility.
I remember back when I was a graduate student, there was a professor named Ogbu there, and he talked about, because Richmond is a largely black area, and he talked about the danger of the acting white being seen as bad if you're black.
Right.
That was years ago when I was a kid. Is that still an issue? Do you know?
Well, I think it is in some contexts. The theory is contested. I'm one of the people who thinks the evidence for it is strong. I've had a doctoral student, African American, from Compton, I believe it was, in LA, a low-income part of LA. And he was basically telling me when he went home to visit, he didn't talk about Berkeley.
I see.
He didn't talk about Berkeley. He didn't feel he could do that because he was seen, he was put down and so forth. And so I do think that there are pockets of these things still. Although I think there's also a growing recognition of the importance of education. Okay. So I think both are present with us.
You're talking about gifted kids now. You've run that summer gifted program. I remember the name of it, but
it's now called the Academic Talent Development Program. Yes.
Okay. Tell us about the program briefly, and then I'll ask you a question. Tell us about the program briefly and what has changed over your many years running the program.
Right. So the Academic Talent Development Program, and that's a name change because it started as the UC Berkeley Gifted Program.
Right.
We changed the name because gifted, when you label a kid gifted, sometimes they feel they don't have to work. And all talent, be it athletic, academic,
yes,
has to be developed. You need to work.
Right.
And so we changed it to Academic Talent Development Program. It's about putting kids together with other kids who are passionate about the subject that they're passionate
Peers
about.
are so important.
Right? So we try to do activity-based learning. Certainly in the elementary grades. In the secondary program, we are more school-like. But in the elementary program, it's about teaching kids to fall in love with the subject.
Right. I remember, being really candid as I always I remember maybe 20 years ago, I had a client whose kid went in the program, and it was very academically rigorous. It was like more school, harder school than regular school. Is the program still like that, or has it changed?
I think the secondary division is perhaps like that, and it's not just it's harder per se, but I think the pace is faster.
Right.
Because you were talking about being bored when you were in school, right?
Right.
So that what we are saying in our secondary division classes, you are either doing one semester or a whole year of work in 6 weeks, or sometimes 4 weeks.
What if I push back on that a bit? If I picture myself, I was kind of bored with academics when I was in high school. But I would love the prestige of going to UC Berkeley summer program, I'm gifted. But what I would love is what you said about being with the kids, but not some compressed, super fast-paced academic thing.
Right.
But I'd rather work on the project like the water. How do we solve the water cleanliness problem?
So that's what we encourage parents to have the kid choose the class. So in other words, this is not about you wanting this kid to move ahead, but the kid choosing the class for themselves. So ATDP, there are some classes that I would have loved when I was in high school, and there are some that I would not have touched with a 10-foot pole. I don't want to be doing pre-calculus in the summer, but math was a bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah.
But creative writing, for instance, I would have loved doing that, and writing and then doing a presentation of my stories at the end. So I think it really is the domain that the kid is passionate about, and that's what makes the difference.
I'm curious. It has nothing to do with education. If I was your teacher, your creative writing teacher, and you're in my little class, and it's a class for adults, and you could choose to write one-page creative writing on anything you want, and you didn't give a shit what anybody else thought, what would you write about?
I probably write about different cultures. I think I'm a closet anthropologist, even though I'm trained as a psychologist.
Yeah.
I am fascinated, and I guess psychology and anthropology overlapping. I'm fascinated with the differences in manifestations of culture, right? So what's an insult in one culture is actually perfectly appropriate in another. The types of foods, the ways people express themselves.
Let's play a little game. I do this with clients all the time because it's revelatory. I'm going to say the first sentence of a bit of creative writing.
Okay.
That's based on what you're saying, and then you'll say the next sentence or two, and then when you run out, I'll say that, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy who lived in Jamaica, or in the Caribbean somewhere, and he was bright, and he felt he got a good education, but
he had no idea about how big the world was and how much he didn't know. Indeed, his world was limited by his knowledge of the Caribbean, and although he saw in school books many other countries.
So one day, he sat on the beach, and he was looking up at the sky and realizing it was a big world, and he said, damn it, I'm going to
leave this country and get to visit other countries. I may not stay there, but at least I'll get to see them.
And I think the first country I want to go to is blank because...
is New Zealand, because in my geography textbook, I saw a hanging valley. It's not something, it's made by a glacier, it's not something that the Caribbean has, and I want to see that in person.
And so, how was I going to get the money? My parents trusted me. My parents knew I was a good boy. So what I did was, I like to bake. So I baked these wonderful Jamaican cookies or whatever, and I sold them after school to the kids. And I saved enough money until I had enough money, with some of my parents' help, for a ticket to New Zealand. And the first thing I did when I arrived was...
I found out where in New Zealand the Hanging Valley was, and I rented a car and I drove to that place. Took a bus, perhaps.
And when you went there, you actually met somebody who changed your life, and he or she...
was somebody from New Zealand who was Maori, and it was a culture I had never even heard of, and they showed me the haka and many of the things that they did, their dances, and I made a wonderful new set of friends.
And so that experience then catapulted you into your next dream, which was to...
perhaps go to Argentina.
Where
I have not yet been, but I hope to go and get to see...
in the story, it's fiction. You're a teenager.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So where I get to go onto the savannas and see the places where the Argentinian cowboys work and herd their cows.
Okay, so now we stop that.
Yeah.
But I do this with my clients because there often are, it's like when they do play therapy, kids can with dolls, it
Right,
enables them
right.
to open up. Is there anything that you, Frank Worrell, the human being, learned about what you want to do now or in the future in your life from our little game that we just played?
I think for me, given where I am, it's sort of confirmed, my interest in different cultures. I do want to go to Argentina. it's on my bucket list. My best friend and I are hoping that we're going to get to go there in the next few years. I think it also, brings up something that I think America has had that many other countries did not have, although with the shrinking of the world it is, and that is playing as an adult. And I think that that's one of the things that I discovered in coming to the United States, that American adults are still playful in a way that many times we were not.
Frank Worrell, in my heart of hearts, it is a profound wish I wish for you that while we're neither of us are kids, while you're young enough and healthy enough, that you go with your friend to Argentina and play.
Yes.
I think in the arc of your life, you would welcome it. Is that true?
I think that's true. That's true.
You are to email me when you've bought your ticket.
Okay, I will do so.
Okay.
I have been tremendously lucky. I think I will say one of the things, becoming a professor was certainly not something on the list growing up in a poor family in Trinidad. And but one of the things I discovered about becoming a professor is that I actually get to go to conferences in different places. Right. And so I've actually gotten to go to over, I think, 40 countries.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yes, and stuff. So I've actually been able to realize.
You sure have, Jesus.
Yeah, some of that dream that I had as a kid.
Okay, I'll be good. I'm supposed to talk education. So in recent years, you've pivoted some of your interest to at-risk kids. You've talked about it somewhat. What's something you haven't said that you'd like to share with our audience about what your thoughts are, feelings are, or insights about at-risk kids?
That we should treat them the same way we treat gifted and talented kids. That they have the same hopes and dreams. And in fact, some of those kids are actually gifted and talented themselves. Though I think one of the major differences I think that we've learned is that they don't have the same strong sense of academic identity.
Sure.
That other kids have. And Martin Covington at Berkeley, the late Martin Covington, had a wonderful thing where he talked about it's better, for instance, to not try and appear to be lazy than to try and appear to be and prove yourself to be unintelligent. And so that there are many kids who don't try.
Yeah, it's a core to procrastination. They feel they're safer psychologically if they don't try.
Exactly. And stuff, and I think that that's one of the things that a lot of the youth who are at risk are dealing with, that they have the same hopes, dreams, and passions, but they do not have the belief, the self-efficacy, the confidence that they will succeed. And so therefore they choose to withdraw. And I think that needs to be at the heart of some of the interventions that we do.
And so before we get to what's next for you, every single guest I've ever had has said to me, that's a lie, many of the guests I've had have said to me afterwards, oh shit, I wish I had said that. So I want to ask you, if there was one more thing you want to tell our audience, and me, what would that one thing be? About anything, it could be anything.
I would say that it's really important to enjoy your life as it is, even in times of stress and trial. That I think one of the things that I have been really lucky with, and I think I got this from my parents, is to be in the moment, to learn to be in the moment and to enjoy yourself, even, to see even sometimes the humor sometimes in dark times.
Okay. Now, ask me a question. Before I ask you the last question, think a moment and think about one question you would like to ask Marty Nemko.
Marty, so you made the choice, you did a PhD in school psychology, and you made the choice not to go into school psychology.
I was there for 4 years. I did do it for 4 years.
Okay.
With Alan Gold, we were both school psychologists there.
Okay, yeah. So what led you to this career away from school psychology?
I think it was an acceptance, really in candor, that my heart really wasn't with the special needs kids. I believe, at the risk of immodesty, that I was given a gift of real intelligence, and that I would better serve people who are of high ability. And so I've been a consultant to 15 college presidents. My career counseling practices with people like you. And that has been, for me, has been a wise choice. The other thing is, being really candid, I'm a show-off by nature. When I was a little boy, I played the piano. My parents showed me I was playing the piano. I like to perform.
Right.
That's why I do this. I
Right.
am not shy about this. I'm verbal. So I'm using my skills and my desire to perform. So I've had for 30 years a show on NPR.
Yes.
Right. I had a one-man show for PBS, the 8 Keys to a Better Work Life. I play piano concerts all the time.
Right.
So it's the combination of wanting to use my gifts to make the biggest difference in the world,
Right.
and this, admittedly, I'm not proud of it, ability, desire to show off.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's good to show off sometimes when you have the talent to show off. It's interesting because one of my potential career paths was in music,
Huh.
and singing and voice.
I had
and
no idea.
opted not to do that. And yes, when I was doing my PhD at Berkeley, I actually took voice lessons from a member of the music faculty. In fact, the day before I got my PhD at the graduation, I did a recital.
Do you want to sing a song for me and I'll accompany you?
Sure.
What? Tell me a song I might know.
Let me see. I said sure without thinking. I haven't performed for a while. I've been conducting, actually.
Really?
I conduct the School of Education. The School of Education has a choir.
I had no idea.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I started conducting as a graduate student in 1990. And when I came back to the faculty in 2003, they asked me to start it again.
What's a song that everybody knows? It could be a Christmas carol. It could be a...
What about, there's a Trinidadian folk song.
I won't be able to accompany that.
Yellowbird. It's fairly...
Yellowbird. Okay.
Yellowbird.
Let's try. Yellowbird is pretty.
No, the yellowbird up high banana tree. Do you know that one?
No.
Yellowbird.
Do another. Sorry, try again. Tell me everybody knows.
Something that everybody knows. That's hard. Musical theater, maybe.
Musical theater, yeah. Do you know, like, You'll Never Walk Alone? Do you know If I Loved You? Any of those classic musical theater?
Yeah, I have to get the words.
No, I'm sorry. This is not going to work, I don't think, right?
Yeah.
Should we forget that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's fine.
It was a thought.
Maybe some other time.
It was a thought. Okay, so now the last question is, let's both breathe for a moment and think, what is next for Frank Worrell that's important?
That's an interesting question. And, I'm actually thinking of retiring in the next 6 years or so. I'm starting to plan that. Really and truly, I am, content? I think really what I'd like is not so much for me, but for my program. We've been under-resourced for many years, and my hope, we are actually doing a search this year, and with luck we will be at 3 faculty by the end of, if not this year, the following year. Three Senate faculty in addition to our non-Senate faculty, and so. But for me, I'm happy. I want to get back to my writing. Being in the APA presidency, I'm past president this year, takes a lot of time, and I have a lot of my co-authors have been quite patient with me. I have a lot of data sitting there to write up, and getting back to being a professor, actually.
Oh, I had one other question. You have a book coming out that you're co-editing or co-authoring about motivation.
Yeah.
Tell me one tip from that.
One tip is to recognize, in the keeping with the education theme, is that everybody is motivated. I think, there's this myth that some people are motivated and some are not. But the actuality is everybody's motivated for something. So the kid who the teacher thinks is not motivated is actually spending their time and passion doing something other than academics. And so being able to find out what they're motivated about.
Let's say I'm interested in video games, like so many kids are. Video games and sports and girls and and I'm a fifth grade teacher, sixth grade teacher. What do you tell me?
I tell you actually to find a book on video games, in fact, for the kid to do their book report on. And in fact, the language in that book may be even beyond the language of the language in the other books, the books that the kids are doing having them do presentations to the class, because what you're doing is, while they can't do video games all the time, you can bring their video game interest into the classroom, which will allow them to connect with you and be willing to work for you as a teacher.
Well, thank you for connecting with me, Frank Worrell.
Thank you.
It was indeed a pleasure. I like to end every one of these by inviting you to, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. And I do like to end all of these by my very favorite quote that may be more important today than ever. It's not from me, it's from a guy named Frank A. Clark, which nobody's ever heard of, but I love his quote. We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.